You ever get that feeling in the pit of your stomach? You know, the one, the kind that comes out of nowhere, like when you're alone in the dark and you swear you can hear someone breathing. Well, let me tell you about the time I felt that feeling, and it wasn't just some vague sense of unease. It was pure, unadulterated terror. It all started on a crisp autumn evening, the kind of night where the moon hung low, casting eerie shadows across the deserted streets. I was driving aimlessly, as I often did when the weight of the world felt a bit too heavy on my shoulders. I found myself in a small, forgotten town, its name long faded from memory. As I rounded a corner, my headlights illuminated a faded sign, Mysterious Marlowe's Circus. Now, I'll admit, I have a morbid fascination with the bizarre and uncanny, so I pulled into the parking lot without much thought. The circus had seen better days. The faded colors and creaking signs hinted at a glorious past, now lost to time. I parked my car, the engine ticking as it cooled, and stepped out into the crisp night air. The aroma of cotton candy and popcorn wafted on the breeze, drawing me closer. The entrance, a creaky old gate, stood ajar as if beckoning me inside. And hey, who am I to resist an invitation? I passed through the gate and found myself in a dimly lit courtyard. The only source of illumination came from a flickering lantern atop a rickety ticket booth. There, an old woman with piercing blue eyes sat, her gnarled fingers clutching a stack of tattered tickets. "Welcome, dearie," she crooned, her voice an odd mix of honey and gravel. "One ticket for the show." Now, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about her made me uneasy. Yet my curiosity got the best of me, and I handed over a few crumpled bills in exchange for a ticket. As I wandered deeper into the circus grounds, I was struck by the sheer emptiness of the place. There were no joyful screams of children, no laughter, just an eerie silence that seemed to wrap around me like a suffocating shroud. I glanced around, searching for any sign of life. And then I saw him. A clown, or at least something resembling a clown, stood beneath a flickering street lamp. He wore tattered, oversized clothes that hung off his emaciated frame. His makeup, once colorful, had faded into a grotesque, almost grotesque, mask. His eyes, oh, those eyes, they were pools of darkness, devoid of any humanity. "Hey there," I called out, my voice quivering just a bit. "What's your story, buddy?" The clown turned to me slowly, his movements stiff and unnatural. A twisted smile crept across his face, revealing jagged yellow teeth. "Would you like to see a trick?" he asked in a voice that sent a shiver down my spine. "Sure, why not?" I replied, trying to sound casual, while my heart raced in my chest. With a flourish, the clown produced a deck of playing cards from his tattered coat. He began to shuffle them with a precision that belied his appearance. "Pick a card," he said, extending the deck toward me. I hesitated for a moment, my gaze locked with those soulless eyes. Then I reached out and selected a card, a queen of spades. The clown took the card from me and, with a theatrical gesture, revealed it. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the card, except it wasn't the queen of spades anymore. It was an image of me, standing there, with a horrified expression on my face. I stumbled back, my mind racing. What the hell is this? The clown's laughter echoed through the deserted courtyard, a bone-chilling sound that seemed to come from all directions. "It's a special trick," he said, his grin widening, "one that reveals your deepest fears." Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me, and when I turned, I was surrounded by a horde of eerie, deformed creatures. Twisted caricatures of humans, each one more grotesque than the last. They moved closer, their eyes fixed on me, their hands reaching out. I backed away, my heart pounding, my mind a whirlwind of terror. "What do you want?" The clown stepped forward, his grin never wavering. "We want to show you the true nature of fear, my dear guest. Just as I thought I was about to become a permanent resident of this nightmare, a blinding light pierced the darkness. It was the old woman from the ticket booth, wielding a lantern that radiated an otherworldly glow. The creatures recoiled from the light, their twisted forms contorting in agony. "Get away from him," she shouted, her voice like thunder. With a final bone-chilling laugh, the clown and his monstrous entourage retreated into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as they had come. The old woman helped me to my feet, her eyes filled with an odd mix of sympathy and regret. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said, her voice softer now, "but you're safe now." As I stumbled back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had glimpsed something ancient and malevolent, something that should never have been awakened. And as I drove away from that forsaken circus, I couldn't help but wonder how many others had been lured into its twisted embrace. But here's the kicker, dear reader. As I was pulling out of the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the rearview mirror, and I froze. My face was covered in clown makeup, vivid and grotesque, a permanent reminder of that nightmarish encounter. So the next time you see a sign for a mysterious circus on a lonely night, I have just one piece of advice for you. Keep driving, no matter how strong that morbid curiosity may be, because once you step through that gate, you might just find yourself face to face with the true nature of fear, and it's a sight you'll never forget. You ever have one of those moments where you're convinced you've stumbled into a nightmare, but it's broad daylight, and you're not asleep? Yeah, I had one of those, and it all started with a creepy circus clown. So there I was, just minding my own business, attending the circus like any other regular person. The sun was still high in the sky, kids were giggling, cotton candy was melting in my hand, and everything seemed perfectly normal. I'd always found clowns a bit unsettling, but who doesn't, right? Anyway, the circus was your typical affair. Acrobats defying gravity, a magician pulling rabbits out of hats, and the clown. Oh boy, that clown. He was different, not the usual jovial type. His makeup was more sinister, black and red, and his eyes, they didn't sparkle with mischief, they gleamed with something darker. As I watched, he performed his routine, honking a horn, juggling oversized balls, and doing that creepy, exaggerated smile thing. But then he locked eyes with me in the audience. That's when things took a turn for the weird. It was like he knew me, like he was performing just for me. I shook it off as a strange coincidence, but his gaze lingered, and I couldn't help but feel a chill crawl up my spine. The rest of the audience laughed and clapped, oblivious to the bizarre connection I felt with that clown. After the show, I decided to head home, put the strange clown out of my mind, and focus on normal life again. But guess who was waiting for me outside the circus tent? Yep, you guessed it, that same creepy clown. He stood there, his oversized shoes tapping on the pavement, and those unsettling eyes still locked onto mine. My heart pounded as I quickened my pace. Okay, buddy, this isn't funny anymore. I glanced over my shoulder, and he was following me. Not running, just casually strolling, but keeping pace. Panic set in, and I sped up, my footsteps echoing in the emptying streets. I didn't dare look back again, fearing what I might see. I finally reached my apartment building, fumbling with my keys as I tried to get inside. I could still feel his presence behind me, like a shadowy figure lurking just out of sight. I rushed inside, locking the door behind me, and peeked through the blinds. He was gone. I tried to convince myself it was a bizarre coincidence, but that nagging feeling in my gut told me otherwise. That clown knew something about me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't done with me. Days turned into restless nights, and I started hearing strange noises outside my window. Whispered laughter, the sound of a horn honking faintly in the distance, and sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of a red and black figure in the darkness. It was always fleeting, like a nightmarish apparition. I began to lose sleep, my nerves fraying with each passing day. I couldn't focus at work, and my friends noticed the bags under my eyes. They suggested therapy or a relaxing vacation, not realizing the source of my anxiety. One evening, as I returned home, I saw him again. That clown was standing under the flickering street lamp, just outside my apartment building. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. This couldn't be happening. He waved at me, that sinister grin never leaving his face. My legs turned to jelly, but I managed to stumble inside and lock the door. I called the police, told them about the stalker clown, but they didn't take me seriously. Who would, right? That night, I sat on my couch, clutching a baseball bat and waiting for something to happen. Hours passed in agonizing silence until I heard a soft tapping on my window. My heart jumped into my throat as I slowly turned to look. There he was, the clown, pressed against the glass. He mouthed something I couldn't hear, and his eyes bored into mine. That's when I snapped. I swung the bat at the window, shattering it, and he disappeared into the night. I had to get away, find somewhere safe. I packed a bag and left my apartment, never looking back. The police couldn't, or wouldn't, help me, and I couldn't stay in that haunted place any longer. I drove for hours, putting as much distance between me and that clown as possible. Exhausted and terrified, I checked into a seedy motel in a small remote town. I thought I might finally get some peace, but that was wishful thinking. Late that night, I woke up to the sound of laughter. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. I glanced out the window and saw a familiar figure standing under a flickering street lamp. It was him, the clown. My heart raced as I realized the horrifying truth. He wasn't just a stalker, he was something else, something supernatural. He could find me no matter where I went. There was no escaping him. In a blind panic, I ran out of the motel room and drove through the night, not stopping until I reached a big city, hoping to get lost in the crowd. But he was always there, lurking just out of sight, a nightmarish spectre that haunted my every move. And now, dear reader, I'm telling you this story from a dimly lit hotel room in a city far away. I can still feel his presence, his eyes watching, waiting. I don't know what that clown wants from me, but I know one thing for sure: I can never outrun him. He's become my personal nightmare, one that will never end. So be careful the next time you're at a circus and you come across a clown with eyes that seem to know your darkest secrets. You might just find yourself in a never-ending nightmare like mine, where the line between reality and horror blurs, and the laughter of a clown becomes the stuff of your darkest fears. You know, there's always been something about clowns that's a bit off-putting. Maybe it's the exaggerated smiles or the colorful but eerie makeup. But I never thought a trip to the circus would turn into a waking nightmare. It was a beautiful summer evening, the kind that makes you forget all your troubles. My family and I decided to go to the local circus that had just set up in town. The kids were excited, and honestly, I was too. It's not every day you get to relive those childhood memories, right? We settled into our seats, the anticipation in the air palpable. The circus started like any other, with a ringmaster introducing the acts. The first few performances were incredible, acrobats soaring through the air and jugglers displaying their impeccable skills. I thought it was going to be a perfect evening. And then he appeared, the clown. He burst into the ring with all the flourish you'd expect. His oversized shoes honked comically, and his face was painted in an unsettling grin that sent shivers down my spine. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being ridiculous, but that nagging feeling of unease lingered. As the clown began his routine, my unease turned into something more sinister. At first, it was small things, pulling a never-ending string of handkerchiefs from his pocket and squirting water from a fake flower. But then it got weird. He brought out a box, and inside there were animals, bunnies and doves. Cute, right? but he didn't treat them with the care and respect you'd expect. Instead, he tossed them around, juggling them like inanimate objects. The audience laughed, thinking it was part of the act, but something in my gut told me otherwise. I turned to my wife and whispered, "This isn't right. He's being rough with those animals." She shot me a look, her eyebrows furrowing, but didn't say anything. Maybe I was overreacting, I thought. I mean, it's a circus, things are supposed to be a bit eccentric, right? But then, it took a dark turn. The clown produced a long, sharp knife from his pocket. My heart raced as he started juggling it, and I could see the fear in the eyes of the animals he held. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my voice trembling with anger. "Hey, that's not funny. Stop it," I shouted. The audience fell silent, and the clown stopped his act, staring at me with those cold, unblinking eyes. It was as if time had frozen, and I realized I had just made a spectacle of myself. My family looked embarrassed, and I felt a pang of guilt for ruining their night. The clown, without breaking eye contact, put the knife away and continued his routine as if nothing had happened. I sank back into my seat, my face flushed with embarrassment. What had I accomplished? Nothing, except making myself look like a lunatic. The show went on, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The animals had disappeared, and the clown's antics became increasingly disturbing. He mimed violence, pretending to strangle himself and pointing at members of the audience with a sinister grin. My unease turned to dread, and I leaned over to my wife, whispering, "We need to leave. This is getting out of hand." She nodded, and we began to gather our things quietly. But as we stood up to leave, the lights dimmed and a spotlight shone on the center of the ring. The clown stood there, a wicked grin plastered across his face, and then the nightmare reached its horrifying climax. In the dim light, I could barely make out what was happening, but it became clear all too quickly. The clown raised a curtain to reveal a gruesome scene. Our family members, tied up and gagged, lying on the floor, helpless. My heart dropped, and panic coursed through my veins. The audience gasped, thinking it was all part of the act, but it wasn't. The clown, with that sickening smile, proceeded to butcher the animals in front of us, their pitiful cries echoing through the tent. It was a macabre spectacle of horror, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gruesome scene. My wife sobbed beside me, and I felt utterly helpless. I wanted to rush to their rescue, but I knew it was too dangerous. The clown was armed, and there was no telling what he might do if provoked. As the clown finished his grotesque act, the lights came back on, revealing the horrified faces of the audience. Some people were in shock, others screamed, and chaos erupted around us. But the clown, he simply bowed and disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of terror and disbelief. The police arrived moments later, but there was no sign of the clown. He had vanished, leaving us with the horrifying aftermath of his twisted performance. I wish I could say it was all a terrible nightmare, but it wasn't. It was a nightmarish reality that we would never forget. The circus had become a circus of horrors, and we were the unwitting audience to a grotesque and twisted show. So, the next time you're at a circus and you see a clown that sends shivers down your spine, trust your instincts. Evil can hide behind a painted smile, and sometimes the nightmares are all too real.